thanks for coming, all of you. It seems very pointed that today, the last day of South Summit here in Madrid, a few hours before that, all of us will be probably in a van or doing carpooling, on a train or a tram or a plane, that we are talking about mobility, right? It is super exciting today. And it's not about just mobility. Actually, this panel is called the mobility revolution, not just the future of mobility. Because when we are talking about mobility, we are talking about too many different things. We are talking about clean energy, air pollution, we are talking about traffic jam, we are talking about a lot of other challenges that our society has ahead. And today, to discuss about mobility, we have an incredible group of panelists with huge experience in the field, and they are going to share with us all their thoughts. Today we have Yasmin Fast, that's correct, right? Yasmin is CEO of GoGo Networks, as well as founder of GoGo Networks. She also is operating partner at Bass Ventures. She holds an MBA from Columbia University, right?
Well, you know very well.
Right?
Yes, yes.
She's also managing director and CEO of a SPAC of $270 million, listed on the NASDAQ. And she has a huge experience in mobility and in private equity when he was before serving for McKinsey in New York, different places actually, but especially in the New York offices. So welcome,
Thank you.
Yasmin, happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Then we have to Chris Thomas. Chris is founder and partner at Assembly Ventures, yes. An incredible fund investing specifically in mobility. He has huge experience, not just leading a lot of operations and M&A acquisition in this space. I would say that you have taken part of the largest operations in the space. But you served also, which is super interesting for us in Europe, as in the US Army in Iraq.
I did.
A few years ago, and also as investment banker in New York, right? Too?
New York and San Francisco.
Yeah. You were founded, right, the run of the Michigan Institute of Mobility, right? And also the Detroit Mobility Lab, right, a few years ago. And you hold, I think, an MBA also from Yale.
Yes.
Wow, that's very impressive. We have also, let's go with Alvaro. Alvaro is, sorry, I need to read that part, yeah. There is a technical director in SACIR, Concesiones, as well as member of the board in SACIR in too many places. He just came from Australia, leading different projects you have in civil infrastructure. You are a civil engineer, and she has been working there for more than 12 years, managing projects of more than $1.2 billion in this field, and working across the world in UK, Europe, Australia, the States, Spain, for sure, a lot of countries. Welcome, Alvaro. And last but not least, we have to Manuel Lopez Vilena, who is not just telecommunication engineer, and you hold an MBA from IE University, right? He's officially he leads the transportation innovation and head of the area of tool solution and access control, which is very amazing too in this huge company called Indra for more than 15 years, leading a very large group of people, right? So thanks to all of you for coming. Let's go with the questions. You are today the ones who will bring the value to the panel. So let's start maybe with you, Yasmin. You define yourself like being passionate about bringing innovation and systemic changes to society, right? And that's why probably you launched GoGo in 2018, a few years ago. And I think your dream is to create the autonomous cities in the future around the world. That's your purpose as entrepreneur, also as investor, right? And everybody knows that when we are talking about mobility, we are talking about the future, about autonomous mobility. But the question that we are posing ourselves is when and how, right? So Yasmin, let us know about what are you doing in Google Networks,
Yes.
and what are the challenges you see ahead in the industry to turn into an autonomous world.
Okay, it's a long question, but maybe just to give also explanation about systemic change. I think what I mean is just like, this is the way we are moving today is not sustainable, makes no sense. You have 1.2 people per car. The cities, the emission of the city are just unbearable. The last mile delivery level is increasing. So the question is like, how do you make like cities and people live just better life? The question about autonomy is a question that I've been like suffering and living deeply since the last 3 or 4 years, and I would say that my thinking has evolved over time. A couple of years ago, I think we were all dreaming of fast-paced change driven by maybe the robotaxi rail and so on. I think we got more humble over the past years and looked more about, okay, what does really autonomy mean, and how can you define use cases that have a chance to have a shorter time to market? What can you do now without having to transform totally like cities from one day to another? What are the steps that you can do? And so that's why we focus on, okay, how can we simplify technology? So there are two things. One is like, of course, if you transport packages instead of people, you simplify the work of the algorithm. If you work in geo-localized area, you simplify the work of the algorithm. If you work at limited speed, you simplify the work of algorithm. So I would say from a vision of really, let's say, mobility, autonomous mobility, transporting people and enchanting, we move toward the last mile logistic angle, where I can see and foresee less hurdle in regulation and also in technology. And when and how all of this wave will happen, I mean, it's a guru question that I always ask to anyone I meet that knows about the space. Everybody has different answers, but I think that it will depend a lot on geographies. Yeah. Also, like if you look at cities in Europe, that they are just harder sometimes to navigate than like new cities in Asia or in the US. So again, I think there's not one answer for this question. I wish there was one, but I think you need to look at what type of mobility, the use cases, the geography, and then try to map that over time. But for sure, the logistic, be it trucking or last mile delivery, can happen in the next couple of years, and we see it. And the mobility of passenger, I think it's a more of a further wave. It's not like in 20 years, but it might be more like in 7.
Can I tack on to that? Is that all right? So I think that I totally agree with everything you said, but one thing to keep in mind is that this is already happening, but it's in fits and starts.
Exactly.
And so to your point, I had the pleasure of being an early investor in 2 companies, Nutonomy and Gatik, focused on the movement of people and the movement of goods. And Nutonomy is now Motional, a multi-billion-dollar joint venture between Hyundai and Aptiv, deploying and taking people on autonomous rides in Las Vegas. You have Cruise that's certified in San Francisco. You have Argo that's in Miami.
You have Waymo in Phoenix.
Yeah, exactly.
You have people in Singapore. But what I mean, when we're talking more about transformation of cities, I think we're talking more about scale.
Totally agree.
And I think now we are in this moment where we're seeing this pocket of innovation with the service that we see, but really getting this scale, we need a couple more years.
And I love what you said about logistics, because I think people always think of autonomy and they're thinking of like you and I moving.
Yeah.
Logistics will be the first mover. Right now in Texas and Arkansas, Gatik is moving goods in box trucks from warehouses to grocery stores and other areas every day. It's amazing. So I think that's spot on.
Yeah.
Great.
Chris,
you can invest then.
Yeah.
Actually, I think you were working already for a lot of years. So probably, Chris, I was studying your framework, the one that you use to breaks the mobility world, right? You have like 3 layers. The first one, I think, is infrastructure. The second one is systems, right? And the third one is application. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that field and actually let us know more about Assembly Ventures?
Yeah, sure. And so every revolution starts with a small amount of diehards. So all of you that are here listening to us today, you believe, which is amazing. So everyone, I'm sure, in this room is familiar with CASE, Connected, Autonomous, Shared Electric. That has been the framework for the last 10 years, created by some savvy consultants at BCG and some German automakers.
I met the German automaker that claims he invented it.
You did?
Yes.
You can tell them that I think it's a huge mistake. And the reason I say that is because I think it served a really useful purpose, but it's a convolution of business plans and technology platforms that don't scale. They don't maximize value for the young companies and for the legacy incumbents. So we stepped back and said, what is the right framework? So we put something forth called ISA.
Yeah.
Infrastructure as the bedrock of future mobility, the digital and the physical, and the way in which that's going to evolve, not necessarily as something that's going to, in and of itself, move autonomy, but it's going to be a redundant system and a complementary system. The systems layer that connects the bytes and the atoms, that allows for the digital and the physical to interact and kind of grow. And then the applications layer, which has customer interaction and monetization. But that ISA framework allows you, in our opinion, to maximize value, to maximize impact, and to have a framework that is standard to ensure that everyone's talking the same language in industry.
Yeah, no, I love this. I'd never heard about it, to be honest, but I think the difference is one is more case, is more like the end state, that cars will be autonomous, connected, electric, and so on, and yours is more how do you get there, no?
Absolutely. And I think for us, like with us at Assembly, we talk about how we invest in the men and women that move the world. We say that because it's us in this room that will define where the world moves. So we believe strongly that the Western world, from the Americas to Europe, has an incredible role to play both through partnership and technology innovation, and that we have this really unique opportunity to empower the legacy industrial centers of the West.
Yeah.
So when you think about the Basque region, when you think about Turin, when you think about Stuttgart, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Tokyo, Seoul, if we innovate, invest in technology, and strike great partnerships, we will win. But we need to make sure we have the legacy operators at the table, and your businesses, I think, are going to be a huge role in that if you make those right partnerships and technology enablements, but you're already doing that.
Well, I always say that the technologies is a little bit in front of the key use of the user and so on.
Yeah.
But we need not just technology. We need the cooperation between all the stakeholders. We need the laws to be able to produce mobility with vehicle connected and so on. Not just the technology. Technology is there. We can use it, but we need the rest of this, let's say, environment of the mobility working together.
Yeah, correct. Actually, Manuel, you have an incredible view of the industry, right? You're in the spotlight. You are seeing a lot of trends, and my question for you would be, what are the trends that actually you can let us know? What is the trend that your team is working on right now? Also, would be interesting to know what trend do you think that is just BS, let's say bullshit, And the third one, what trend for you is so interesting that you would personally invest in? If you are allowed to say that, by the way.
For us as Indra, we are a technological, in Indra, we are a technological company, so the technology is very important for all our projects. Sometimes people ask me, when I think the autonomous vehicle is going to be, let's say, in a massive scale in the roads, I say always, I don't know, but today we are working in several projects in the States, in Australia, in the UK, just using little cases for connecting autonomous vehicle. It's not going to be that you can drive your car from here to here in autonomous way during all the time, but in some part of the highway, for sure you are going to be able to drive in that way. So we are working in this kind of project, just integrating the, let's say, normal driving with autonomous and connected driving all together, because
but this is more assisted driving for me, because I think if it's level 2 or 3 of autonomy, you still need a driver, which is how do you make the, but it doesn't solve, like the real revolution for me is level 4 when really there is no driver, because that's where the economics are incredible, and that's really where it totally changed the paradigm.
Yeah.
When all these things about like that the OEMs are doing and claiming it's autonomous, or even like Elon Musk with the Tesla assisted driving, it's not autonomous driving, it's assisted ADAS.
Yeah.
Well, for sure.
I mean, for me at least.
No, for sure. 2 days ago, I was reading a newspaper, and it was saying that we pass for transport things with horses to transport things with cars, let's say, in a period of 30 years.
Yes.
And it was
a
another period that things were transported by a horse and at the same time by car, with motor, let's say, right? So we are going to.
But I think it's a great comparison because I always think it's the same level of transition. It's not that the horse suddenly is transforming into a car. So a car is not slowly transforming into an autonomous car. It's just a different animal that has the same name. And I think the comparison that you just made is spot on.
I feel like I'm at a really good tennis match right now.
Sorry.
No, this is good.
Let's break the match with Álvaro. Álvaro, what is it? Sorry.
Just to say, at the end of the day, we are technological, I say, but the main thing that we are working is to reduce emissions, to avoid congestion to go to the city, because the space in the downtown is always the same. So we have to avoid congestion, and we have to solve the real-time needs that the people have today, from going here to here in real time, combining low emissions, combining no congestion.
Yeah.
That's the role that the technology has to play in this environment, I think.
Let's give the floor to Álvaro, because in SACIR you have a very good vision also in the about the mobility wall, and you are expert in infrastructure, which is specifically a layer that Chris was mentioning before. So what is the key role that SACIR is going to play in the future of mobility in the wall from that point of view?
Well, I think it's obvious that many of these changes are happening now, and many more will happen. There are many technologies that will come, but definitely we need to integrate these technologies with the infrastructure around. So, okay, we are having sharing vehicles. We need to integrate these sharing vehicles with existing infrastructure. We need to develop parkings, hubs, and all this technology. The way that we can integrate it is working together with the governments, because governments by themselves are going to have difficulties, particularly this time where leverage or debt of all the cities is quite high. So the investment from the private sector is critical to develop all these technologies and all the infrastructure that is required. So we really see that infrastructure is going to require a vast amount of investment and working with the administrations to develop the technology that many companies are developing at this point in time.
Yeah. I know that the world is very big and complex in this regard, but do you see any specific challenge from the legal point of view for a lot of cities that maybe nobody is covering right now, and probably you have a good view on this, talking about countries that are more advanced in this regard, trying to solve all these mobility challenges we have ahead? Chris?
I'm sorry, can you restate the question?
Yeah, no, the question is to understand what are the legal changes you see.
The legal changes, the regulatory environment.
The regulatory changes,
There are so many.
So many.
And I think the reason is that you have this patchwork of well-intentioned regulations that actually they are slowing down and pushing against the evolution and the revolution in mobility. And so I love what you said about the necessity of working with government. I think you need to have these triple Ps, public-private partnerships that are truly incenting and empowering the user. But I also think you need to look at infrastructure with a digital-first mindset. And there's still a focus on, and there needs to be, frankly, on how do we actually maintenance, build, and repair our legacy physical infrastructure. But digital infrastructure businesses, what is digital infrastructure? I mean, you're talking about the future of payment, the future of kind of AI overlay and safety. I think digital on a standalone basis can be more valuable than the physical over time. But the regulatory environment as it relates to autonomous passenger, as it relates to corridors for logistics, as we think about not only just terrestrial, this is terrestrial, not only land-based infrastructure regulatory environments, but aerospace. How are we looking at differentiated robots and drones and how they're being utilized as well? It's going to be very difficult because you have a legacy regulatory environment that is just starting to bone up on how do they have the ability to regulate and work with the private sector in a way that doesn't legislate for the sake of legislation, but actually incents technology and safety.
You're always very close to regulator, right?
Yeah.
From regulator point of view, that Phil.
In my opinion, I think that for the point of view of the technological point of view, right, we have to rule the different protocols to use the same, everyone, each stakeholder go in his own way without taking in account the rest of the stakeholder, right? But right now, for instance, in the autonomous mobility, one pilot here, another pilot there, they are working good, but we need the law, we need the legislation, we need the law, the rules,
the regulatory framework,
to put that in a massive population, and in an easy way for the social side to accept to this kind of technology. That's, in my opinion, the role that a government can play in this environment.
I think just to clarify something, one of the risks of working with the government sometimes is sudden changes from one side to the totally the opposite. So certain principles need to be agreed within the government. So there is a critical path to follow. The way of adjusting these principles might be the cooperation between public and private sector, which is paramount to the success of this implementation of technology.
Yes.
But I like to hear that you say that regulation is such an issue, because like I always consider the US that it's like much easier than Europe.
It should be,
if
right?
you go to Europe, you will see like half of our work is regulatory work at national, at city, and at Brussels level.
We've had regional, state, and kind of, there's nothing at the federal level, which is a lack of political will, in my opinion, that hasn't been done.
But at least you can have commercial licenses at scale in some cities. You have like sidewalk robots that have a real regulatory legal entity. Like in Spain, we're launching, for instance, like just the sidewalk robots. They have no name. They don't even know what it is. So we're always like, this is the biggest challenge, regulation, and also the use of the space.
Especially for you in your, for all of you.
For everybody that wants to work
and really importantly, when you juxtapose this to China, when you look at the broad deployments,
and the willingness to go.
Absolutely. We have to have a general framework, and if we have one in the Americas, if we have one in Europe, innovation will grow tremendously. Deployments will grow tremendously.
Because we can get scale. Otherwise, it's just pilots.
And it's a growth opportunity, and it's a leadership opportunity that right now we're passing on, which is a shame.
Let me pick your brain a very interesting point. I would like you to picture yourself in 10 years down the road, okay? And it's 8:30, or probably the rush hour, the equivalent to the rush hour in your city, and you have a meeting very early in the morning. How do you get there?
I think nobody has a crystal ball, but I think it's going to be faster. For sure, we'll get quicker. It's going to be cheaper and safer. That's for sure. I can foresee many different transport ways of reaching to one place, sharing different transportation methods to reach to one point. Intermodal transportation, I think, is the...
I think we have to work in a multimodality way of transport, right? Right now we are in the States working in a reversible lanes. I think it's a very good idea just to access to the city. Imagine 4 lanes in the morning, and then in the afternoon reversible, and getting a 4 lane out of the city. It's a solution that you are at least pushing over the world there. But as Alvaro said, we don't have the crystal to see the future. But if you want to go there, maybe during the middle, you are going to find some solution. Because you want to go there, and it's going to be good for the mobility, for sure.
Chris, what about you?
This is a future that I know, actually, which I know very few.
Disagree with that.
But I know this one, and depending on where I'm going, there'll be 2 ways. I'll either walk, and I say that because I think we're going to see infrastructure be centered around more of a human context, and people are going to be in environments and in cities, which makes that you're not commuting there. But if I am commuting, if I'm going to a meeting, I'm going to be a member of a service, and whether that's from our friends at Stellantis or at Volkswagen or at Toyota, and I will have access to all differentiated types of mobility, and I will have a credit to use those assets as I need them. The single-owned automobile, I think, for especially young families and individuals that want that freedom, that's going to continue to be a big business. But the flexibility of multimodal, but within a context in which I understand all my options, that's a business plan. That's $1 billion company that doesn't exist yet, and that's exciting.
And that's the one that you want to invest.
That's what I'm good. Yeah, right? If you know this company, talk to me.
Let's talk to you. What about you? How do you get your first meeting 10 years from now?
I think I kind of agree with Chris. I don't see that in 10 years there will be actually so much traffic. I mean, maybe I'm very optimistic, but I think hopefully we will find a solution to avoid that. I think by then, I agree, there will be almost no ownership of assets. So it will be more like you have a cell phone and you have a membership, and that's it. I believe that it will be much more also like shared. Like we are struggling now with pooling because there's not enough liquidity. But I believe that like when people have no more ownership of private cars, then it's going to be much more massive, the pooling opportunity. So you will be able to be driven with maybe 1 or 2 people on your way, but without having to drive or to pay for a car. So like an Uber pool, but that actually works. And then I kind of hope that like in 10 years, yes, you'll have a lot of actually vehicles that won't have human drivers that will take you from one place to another like in a more autonomous way. And I think also cities will have changed a lot. A lot of city centers will be without cars. So then it will be more like what you're saying, walking or micromobility. And then the rest hopefully will be more fluid with shared, connected, autonomous electric vehicles.
Right. Unfortunately, the time is constrained, guys. So, wow, at the end. Thanks for your time today, your thoughts. I really think it was a really good conversation. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.